Amateur Traveler is in its 20th year now, but can you imagine if I had people on the show who had never been to the destination, but had just read about it or seen a movie about it? That wouldn't make any sense at all, and you wouldn't listen. We all know how important it is to receive advice from people who know a destination to get the most authentic local experience. And a great option for experiencing this is Explore Worldwide and their authentic small group adventures, led by local tour leaders, perfect for solo travelers who want to meet like-minded people with a desire for adventure. I'm often an independent traveler, but 2 of my last 3 trips were with small group tours because they organize everything and it's a lot easier. If you want to recreate the tour I did to Malta, they have a Malta and Gozo Discovery Tour. I'm intrigued by one of their tours called A Taste of Sicily. The company again is Explore Worldwide, and visit exploreworldwide.com to learn more. And thanks to Explore Worldwide for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. The nights are long, the days are short, and the weather is chilly to downright cold depending on where you are. It's a good time to slip into a Quince iconic Mongolian cashmere sweaters, which start at only $50. You can treat yourself to everyday luxury at an affordable price with Quince. If you really want to dive into luxury, you can check out their leather handbags, washable silk shirts, and European linen sheet sets. Whatever you're looking for at Quince, all the prices are 50 to 80% less than similar brands, and they do that by partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the middleman. They only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing processes. And of course, they use premium fabrics and finishes for that luxury feel in every piece. But you've already heard me rave about my Quince travel pants. Treat yourself this winter without the luxury price tag. Go to quince.com/traveler for 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/traveler to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/traveler, and thanks to Quince for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. Amateur Traveler Podcast, Episode 73. Today we join a couple high school students on a bike tour from Vancouver, British Columbia to San Jose, California.
I got my bags packed, I'm on a roll. I'm heading out there, and I'm ready to go. I'm looking real good in my passport photo. Oh, no. 15-hour flight, oh, I don't think I'll ever be coming home. You know I love it. Got to see one more cathedral. I got to sit in one more cafe. I know that I should be heading home, but maybe not today.
Welcome to the Amateur Traveler Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Christensen. I have 3 news stories for you today. The first one is if you're planning on going to see Night at a museum, you might be interested in knowing that you actually can spend the night at Manhattan's American Museum of Natural History and see what the 94-foot blue whale really does after dark, according to an article in USA Today. In a program similar to those at a growing number of museums and aquariums, children 8 to 12, accompanied by a parent or chaperone, will take a flashlight tour, have a snack and a bed down in sleeping bags and cots in the Hall of Ocean Life. Cost of Night at a museum is $75 to $79 for non-members and includes breakfast. I'll put links to more information about that in the show notes at amateurtraveler.com. In another odd happening at New York City recently. This comes from an article in the blog of Tara Lee Cobble from December 18th. New York City did an unsilent night. This year, roughly 1,500 people gathered at the arch of Washington Square Park, some of whom had large boom boxes in hand. Composer Phil Klein passed out tapes with various instrumental recordings to the people with boom boxes. At 7 p.m., the countdown began, and everyone simultaneously pressed play. Then they began a slow, steady march from Washington Square Park to Tompkins Square Park, roughly a mile through the streets of Manhattan, boom boxes working together to create a symphony. According to Tara Lee Cobble, the other thing that this coincided with was SantaCon, where people were parading around all day long in New York City dressed as Santa. So many of the people on the Unsilent Night were also dressed as Santa. So only in New York. The third story I have for you today is that there is a new directory of podcasts where I would appreciate you voting for The Amateur Traveler, but you also might be interested in finding out some other popular podcasts, and that's one at dig.com. And I'll put a link in the show notes to The Amateur Traveler at dig.com as well as to the directory itself. I'd like to welcome to the show Marcel, and I brought on Marcel, who I happen to know, to talk about an unusual way to spend his summer vacation. Welcome to the show, Marcel.
Thank you very much, Chris.
So, unlike a lot of college, let's try that again. Unlike a lot of high school students, last summer you were between your junior and senior year of high school. You didn't spend it working at the Foster Freeze or the Dairy Queen or something like that. Tell us a little bit about what you were doing last summer.
Yeah, well, I usually don't enjoy fast food as much anyway, so I decided to bike from Canada down to San Jose, California with my friend Lev over a 3-week period. He mentioned it originally in December of '05 and said, hey, you know, my dad lives up in Vancouver, BC. I was wanting to bike up there, and I thought, you know, you're crazy. He decided then, or we looked at it over the next couple months and then decided that we wanted to do that, so we started planning out our route and found some maps online for the Adventure Cycling Association, and then started planning all our logistics, and then getting a cause eventually, which was really our biggest challenge. Since we are both high schoolers, we don't exactly have huge amounts of cash on hand, so we decided to do the bike tour as a fundraiser for the Lance Armstrong Foundation. They had a new grassroots fundraiser thing on their website, and that allowed us to put on the tour for someone else, and that helped us get a whole bunch of sponsors. On our website you'll see, I mean, we have Cat Eye and Bellwether and Bell Sports. They make the helmets, and Road ID and a whole bunch of other companies that donated equipment and clothing for our tour, which helped us make the 3 weeks possible to bike all the way down the coast.
Now, let's start with that part here just a bit, because that actually intrigued me a lot. You're only in high school, you realize.
Yeah.
I've heard of these companies. How did you get sponsorship? Was that arranged through the Livestrong Foundation, or was that something you did on your own? Or?
Well, yeah, it was the Lance Armstrong Foundation. They're also known as Livestrong. That's the two names. They did surprisingly little for the actual tour. I just got a poster in the mail signed by all of them, with our grand total of $725, I believe, that we fundraised for them. Generally, we just had our name associated with them, and they gave us a website where people could donate through. And other than that, we did all of these sponsorships and individual fundraising completely on our own. Lev and I got together and drafted up a proposal letter for sponsorships, which we sent out in snail mail form to about 55 companies just by Googling all over the place for days, literally, to get companies that would be potential sources that might want to fundraise this sort of thing, and of course a couple long shots as well, and some electronic companies like Sony and stuff, which would probably never give us something, but everything's worth a shot if it costs 39 cents. So we did that and pulled about 55
and what did you
letters.
Tell people? We're two 17-year-old kids who were planning to bike almost 1,300 miles. Would you like to sponsor us?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, we started off, we're both high schoolers, and we're doing this because we want to raise some cancer awareness and still have fun while doing it, and we wanted an excuse to make our bike tour. We didn't quite say it that way. That allowed us we just pretty much wrote to them and asked, hey, if you have anything, if you'd like to make monetary donations directly to the tour, to us, or to the Lance Armstrong Foundation, or in-kind donations with equipment or something, that'd be wonderful. Please contact us here and here. It worked for about 9 companies or so. That they all did in-kind donations, because generally companies won't just give funds out for free unless we're part of the budget or knew someone at the company. So that worked best. And one of the companies, Bellwether, I initially crossed them off our list because I didn't hear back from them. That then I got an email about a month before a tour or something saying, oh, I'm so sorry I didn't get back to you earlier. The following items are in the mail, and there's about a 20-item list that they that he had sent to us, and a couple days later we had this huge box arrive in front of my house with just tons of clothes and gear, and it was great. So they actually turned out to be our biggest sponsor, which is pretty great.
So as you're getting ready for this trip, you're doing that, and you're also trying to finish high school, or finish your junior year of high school. You're also getting ready for the trip. What all did you have to do to get ready for the trip?
Well, the biggest one was making sure that the trip was safe, that we were prepared for it, and that our parents were prepared for it. Both Lev's parents and my parents were, of course, concerned with our safety, as were we, of course, since we'd be biking through. Washington wasn't as big of a concern because it wasn't freeways or large highways, at least. Through Oregon and California, we're largely on Highway 101 and Highway 1, which were, of course, much greater safety hazards, and that was our real concern. So I did a lot of research beforehand. Both Lev and I spent hours on the internet looking at different people that had done the tour. The Oregon coast has a lot of information about it because many people ride the Oregon Coast Trail. Usually 6 or 7 days, they say, for it, all the way down the coast, which is an absolutely gorgeous bike ride. And we did lots of research on that to make sure it was safe and have as much confidence as we could going into the tour. Our parents would be safe with it, and that Lev and I would be. Our parents, or my parents, actually met us about halfway down the Oregon coast and came up for a weekend, and then spent 2 nights with us, following us for one of the days, and then meeting us up at the next evening. That was one of our big sort of obstacles, is a safety thing. The other one was, of course, preparing ourselves physically for the tour. We're both avid bicyclists, but we're typically mountain bikers, and we both had our mountain bikes. We had never actually road biked before since 1.5, 2 months before the tour, which a lot of people still are very surprised at. And we got one of the bikes donated from a very kind gentleman in San Francisco who I'd sent an email to over Craigslist, and he said, "Yeah, sure, I've got my bike. I'll be happy to give it to you since it's a good cause, and I've been trying to find someone to give it to." So we got a free road bike from him, which we actually spent probably about $200 getting different components on it and mountain cassette on the back instead of a road cassette, so that we could have enough gears to make it up the hills with 30 pounds or 40 pounds of gear on the back.
And one thing I didn't see, you have a lot of statistics on your website, and we'll put a link to that in the show notes. It's bikeforacure.blogspot.com, but I'll put a link in for those people who don't have to understand what I'm saying on the show. One thing you don't have in there is, what was the tallest pass you had to go over?
Well, in just around Leggett in California, we hit a pass of about 1,700 feet, and doesn't sound very high, but when you're biking with 30, 40 pounds of gear on the back, it definitely dragged on. Good thing was that pass actually came over about a 2-day period because we got to slowly work up towards it. It was not the most difficult one that we had done.
So 40 pounds of gear, what all do you take? You're camping?
Yeah, we were camping. We spent every night, or pretty much every night, in our tent. We spent one night with my parents in a yurt that they rented, and then one other night we spent with a very nice gentleman in Florence, Oregon, who offered his house to us for an evening with a nice shower and big warm beds, which was a very nice alteration in the middle of the tour. But the rest of the time we were camping, so we, of course, had to bring along all our camping gear. Bought a nice 2-man, 3-season tent before the tour, which weighed about 5-7 pounds. And then we had cooking gear. We had a nice stove and liquid fuel. We did white gas, pots and pans, and our food supply. The food supply, we initially had way too much because my experience in the past has been with self-sustained hiking, so where you typically have to carry all your food with you. So we actually started off the tour, each of us with a bear container on the back, which was the most effective way to store the food to keep it away from little bugs, little bears, mini bears, and big bears, if we ever hit any, which we didn't because we're always in populated areas. But it turns out that the bear containers were way overkill because every day we were hitting multiple stores where we could buy supplies and refuel all our food. So our 40-pound initial loads estimated went down to about 32 when we were coming into San Jose.
Is there a point at which you're out on the bike and you think, what am I doing here? And you think about turning back?
Oh, yeah. Well, pretty much every day, one of those moments hits you. But generally, Oh, the very beginning. I mean, we took the Amtrak up to Vancouver, BC, and that was supposed to be 23 hours and 45 minutes with the bus ride included from Seattle up to Vancouver. But it ended up being around 30 hours of travel time from the time we left our house to the time we arrived at Lev's father's house in Vancouver. So that's one of those moments where you're like, are we really doing this? I mean, it was 30 hours in an American train, which was starting and stopping the whole time. But when we're actually on the road, I mean, there are definitely those moments where it's really, really cold and you're going downhill and you're not pedaling right now. I mean, yeah, it's nice. You're just floating downhill, but it's freezing. And, I mean, you don't put on any more clothes because you just climbed up or biked up a steep hill, and then you're all warm, and at the top you're going down, and it just starts freezing. You're like, why am I doing this? Or on the long climbs up in the early morning when you have to get out of your tent in the morning, pack up in freezing cold, and then start biking, and you're just sore, ridiculously sore, especially during the first 4 days or so. That's really the worst, and that's what I'd read up to, because that's when your body's really adapting to the different lifestyle of biking for 5 to 10 hours a day. So,
and you're doing an average of about a little short of 70 miles a day.
Yeah.
And you have in here your average speed and your maximum speed. And how is it that you know what your maximum speed is?
Well, we have bike speedometers on our mountain bikes, but Cat-Eye donated 2 Enduro 8 bike computers, which we installed on each of our bicycles, and then we took the average data from each one, because there's always a little bit of margin of error with different wheel sizes and different air pressure and stuff. It'll read slightly differently. But we took the average moving times of each bicycle and distances that were traveled, and then plugged those in, and the bike computers give us maximum speeds for the day, average speed for the day, and then time that the wheels were moving, which is the one statistic you'll see. I think about 5.5 hours of wheel moving time average throughout our trip per day. So the bike computers are definitely useful for that. The maximum speed, some people might look at the 49 miles an hour as being pretty fast for a bike, which it definitely is. Sadly, they're 1 mile per hour short of being 50. That was definitely what we hit many times. In Washington, there were a couple spots out in the middle of nowhere, and it's just these little roads, and they're gorgeous, and you see the sign 16% grade, and then Lev and I turn to each other and go, sweet. So get ready for it, wind up, and go extra fast down those, and those were the ones where we're hitting upper 30s and mid 40s. And then the really exciting one is when I hit 49 going down one hill in Northern California, I think, and that was the 49 miles an hour down about a 1.5 mile long freeway run, which is pretty awesome. So,
when were you really glad? What moments were you really glad that you'd done it?
There's definitely the moments when, I mean, the views is just amazing to be biking along. The sunny days, especially along the Oregon and California coast, the views are just so amazing. In the morning with the fog rolling up over the road and then the sun shining through the trees. And it's just one of those moments where you're like, man, I'm really glad I'm here, not sitting in front of the computer playing, who knows, Game Boy or whatever in front of the TV. And, I mean, it's just you're out there in nature, and it's just wonderful. And then talking with locals when you're in a store and telling them what you're doing it for and seeing the smiles on their faces. And, I mean, one of the moments where we really, really felt good about the trip was in the middle of Oregon. Some gentleman walked up to us, or I think it's an ice cream parlor or something. We're picking up our 3rd round of Tillamook ice cream, and he comes up and talks with us and says, yeah, I'm a cancer survivor, and I think this is really wonderful what you guys are doing, and I just want to thank you. And then he hands us like $20 or something for the tour, which is just wonderful. So when you have that personal one-on-one experience with someone, it just feels so good that we're doing something for other people. So.
And I imagine if people who are listening wanted to also donate, it's not too late to continue that sponsorship for that trip?
Yeah, I believe the website's still up and running. The donation website's still up and running, I believe. So you can visit the link through our webpage. There's our RLAF donation page link on the right side. And you can link to the Lance Armstrong Foundation website, and we'll be happy to have your donations added to our supply.
What was the biggest surprise on the trip? You've done a lot of planning ahead of time. You've been planning for months. What caught you completely by surprise?
Very initially, we were surprised at how quickly we were actually traveling. We actually ended up we had planned out the trip beforehand, and I had big maps laid out, and I'd kind of very roughly estimated. We'd initially thought about 60 miles per day, so we had estimated out 60 miles a day and mapped it out on the map with a little spot around here is where we should be camping for the 15th night, for the 16th night. Every night we had mapped out approximately where we should be. And the first couple days we were running pretty long days, and we were absolutely surprised that we were ahead of schedule. So when I finally planned it out down towards the Oregon coast, we were like, wow, we're really far ahead. And we ended up coming in to San Jose 2 days earlier than we had expected, which was just wonderful. So that was one of the big happy surprises. Not so good surprise was also our biggest and only real problem along the tour were punctures, and then Lev's rear tire or rear wheel had some nice spokes breaking out. So
I wondered, you didn't have that statistic of how many tires you had to change or how
No.
many breakdowns you had, but it had occurred to me.
Yeah. On the Adventure Cycling Association website, they have a link for, or they have tour logs as well, and ours is listed there, and there has a number of flats. I believe it was 4 flats, which is
That's not bad.
very good for what I've read. I've heard some people with 30 or 40 or 50 flats for that length duration of tour.
4
But,
flats between the two bikes?
Between the two bikes,
So
and
20,
all the 4
almost
flats.
600 miles and 4 flats.
Yeah, pretty much.
Interesting.
4 wheels going that distance.
Right.
So the exciting, the kind of annoying thing about that is that it was all on Lev's rear tire.
No,
So
no.
all the mechanical problems we had were with Lev's rear tire or with his derailleur. The rear wheel had the spokes cracking out. About day 4, we discovered that some of the spokes were cracking out of the rim. When we decided to check the wheel again, or when we happened to remember to check the wheel again a couple days later, to our surprise, all but 3 of the spokes had cracks on the rim to some extent. You can see the pictures on our website of the severity of them. It was in Brookings, Oregon, I believe, when we bought a replacement rear wheel for Lev. For $100, we picked up a very nice Sun rim with spokes and a Dior hub from Shimano, which is very nice components, and installed that, spent the afternoon installing that right in front of the shop. You see some pictures of that as well. And then biked on. The next day, some of the spokes were started cracking out, and we were absolutely appalled by this. Of course, we had just purchased this brand new wheel, and they were cracking out already. So we stopped then in Fort Bragg, went to a bike shop there, and they told us, okay, we can rebuild the wheel for you with new spokes for $180. And we're like, well, we just paid $100 to get this wheel. We don't want to pay twice that almost to get it rebuilt. So rebuilding would involve just putting new spokes in, keeping the rim and keeping the hub. We ended up talking with them and chatting and telling them what we were doing. We got it down to $100 or $80 maybe, and they fixed up the wheel, and then since then we didn't have any problems with the spokes. But that was really the big thing that happened on our tour, which we were prepared for. We had extra funds in case some stuff did go wrong. But that was really the main thing that happened. The other one that was kind of exciting is the derailleur housing for the derailleur cable housing on Lev's bike also did this. It spidered out. It was just so old that the housing started cracking, and it was just down to the metal wires that are surrounding the cable on the inside. So we replaced that one as well. In a mosquito-ridden, shady spot on the side of the road and along the Oregon coast. We probably got about 30 bites each when we were reinstalling that cable while eating Cheez-Its, but that was good. So that's the big one. In the first couple of days, we had this slow flat that was really annoying, and we thought it was just a leaky valve at first, but then it slowly sped up, and we were like, oh, we'll make it there for the night, and we ended up not making it quite that far. But we had to replace the wheel before we got there, or replace the tube. So we always had spare tubes along and tons of bike tools as well to fix just about any typical thing that would happen to the bike along the way. But we had the Adventure Cycling Association maps, which mapped out the Pacific Coast bicycle route all the way from Vancouver down to Tijuana. But we ended up not following the route for a large part of it, surprisingly, or for little parts of it, where they took this back route that was 10 miles longer or something and, quote, more scenic. And usually around the Oregon, we followed the route pretty precisely through Washington, and then the Oregon coast, we stuck to 101 a lot of times when the route went a little bit off route, off of 101. So we stayed on 101 and had quicker ride times and shorter total distance as well, which was nice. We got back faster. And we also had some very nice downhills. I mean, before Florence, Oregon, we had, I think it was a 1 mile uphill and then a 5 mile downhill afterwards, which was just gorgeous. No cars on the road, through green trees, and we're just gliding behind each other, drafting on behind each other to break. One person breaks the wind and the other one's falling behind. So that's always good fun.
Was there anything you wish you had known before you had done this trip?
The main thing that I wish I would have known or realized probably would have been the food situation, that we really are in a populated area and we're always hitting food. We ended up dumping our bear containers. One of the bear containers was my parents', and the next day we said, both of them. So we ended up dumping both of the bear containers and just going down to 2 panniers each on the back of our bikes, which was more than enough once we went into the California coast. And that was the main thing, really, the weight from those bear containers. We noticed we were going a lot faster, average, towards the end of the tour. Of course, A, because we're getting closer to home, so you go faster, but B, because we had a lot less weight on our bikes. The other thing that I would have liked to know is that Washington is a lot hotter than California, believe it or not. We hit 98-degree weather in Washington on a couple of those days, and then in California we were definitely in the 50s and 60s at night, and it was getting a lot chillier. So we had our warm weather clothing with us for Washington, then dumped a significant amount of the bulk with my parents in Oregon. We didn't end up needing anything that we had left with them, but it would have been interesting. It would have been good to know that Washington was going to be so hot, so we didn't have to carry the extra stuff around as well.
What are you doing next summer?
Well, we had thought, the thought has come to both of us to bike from San Jose down and finish it off down to the border to Mexico around Tijuana. We're not quite sure if we're going to have the time to do that because we're going to do some other trips as well. Definitely some shorter trips are on our list this coming year. We'd like to finish the trip up down to Mexico, just to say that we've done the whole coast, of course.
Any closing comments that you use to sum up the trip?
Lev had a nice quote. One of the great things about the tour is meeting all the random people along the way and biking through all the, quote, quirky towns, especially in Oregon. It's just a wonderful experience to be able to spend 21 days with a really close friend of yours biking every day, just biking. And, you really become one with your bike and one with each other, just biking along. I think that's a great experience that I wish that everyone would be able to do at some time in their life or something similar. Not exactly 3 weeks biking from Canada to San Jose, but something similar is definitely something I'd suggest to everyone to be able to do at some point in time.
Well, Marcel, I thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your experience.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chris. Appreciate it.
This is going to be a little shorter show today, in part because I'm recording it on Christmas Day, because of a number of things are coming up over the next week. I do have one internet resource for you today. Since we were talking about this trip starting in Vancouver, I've got a link to a resource called Why Vancouver, whyvancouver.com, that talks about various things to do while you're in that city, which we've done an episode on before. So check out whyvancouver.com. I did get an email a couple of weeks back from Pete, and Pete had this to write: have you ever produced a podcast on Portugal? Which I have not. I was planning on going there to visit my ancestors' village up in the mountains near the Spanish border, but my wife was recently diagnosed with cancer. Isn't everyone anymore? I had to delay my plans, but she is recovering well, and hopefully I can travel there this spring. I enjoyed your podcast on Paris, and I will be listening to the rest of your shows. I listen while working at a construction site. It is sure much more pleasant than listening to the news. Appreciate the email, Pete. I'm pleased that your wife is doing well. If anyone has real good travel experiences for Portugal, we still have some time, it sounds like, before Pete is going, so I'd love to do a show and provide that as a resource for both he and his wife. So let me know if you have some real good travel experience in Portugal. As always, I'd love to hear from you. Please check out the website at amateurtraveler.com and leave a comment, or go to the discussion boards at amateurtraveler.com/board. Send me an email at host@amateurtraveler.com, or call me on the listener comment line at 206-MOM-LOVE. And as always, thanks so much for listening.
One more cathedral, I got to sit in one more cafe. I know that I should be heading home, but maybe not today.
The best and the brightest, served up daily by the sharpest minds in content delivery, Podshow and Limelight.